policy itself, it's a starting point. It's not the end point. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think policies have their place,
Yes.
and they work really well. They have their place and provide workplace protections, so that if something really untoward does happen, there is a protocol in place. There's a process to hold people formally accountable. Policies have a great place in terms of signposting to people. Come and join our company. We're saying we've identified you, for example. We care about you, so you can come and join us, and you'll be perfectly safe and able to thrive working here. So they're great signposts. They're great kind of backstops, but they generally have very little impact on what's actually happening inside a business.
That's the important thing. So just the policy by itself, it's important to have, but it's not enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other great thing, when I'm talking about this kind of working with teams, is like you're constantly talking about what they're there to achieve, So as well as supporting each other, they're all getting entirely focused on achieving what the company wants them to achieve, which may be their OKRs or their KPIs, however their achievements and their output is measured. So you have the opportunity to kind of instill that focus in kind of, achieving the desired outputs, at the same time. And which CEO would like that?
They're making connections, aren't they?
Yeah. So, but that places us as a diversity, inclusion, belonging consultancy in a challenging position, because we'll say go to a company and our message is don't spend loads of money on employing a diversity inclusion person, a department, which usually sits over in HR or side of the company. Spend that money really giving your people managers great education and giving teams the opportunity to kind of interact with each other on a different level outside of just turning up and doing their work together. So they use that money to, give people an opportunity off-site, really kind of connect with each other, find out about each other. And that will have a great impact on your P&L, because everybody's focused on achieving what you want them to achieve. People are going to want to come in and work with their teammates. So it's going to have all those desired effects, is reducing sickness, reducing absence. It's going to reduce attrition, because people are going to say, I love working in that team.
Yeah.
Then diversity is then the output. That's the successful outcome. It's not the starting point.
So it's a bit like, we want people to be happy. Just telling people to be happy doesn't make them happy.
Mm-hmm.
It's the output. It's the outcome of other things happening.
Yeah. And how many companies out there do a really good job, especially say in Pride Month, like we're in at the moment.
Yeah.
And they will be sending loads of messages to people in the LGBTQIA plus community. We're a great company. Come and work for us. We're friendly. You can come here and be your authentic self. Happy days. But they'll spend lots of money on that kind of activity. But have they actually internally focused and ensured that that is the experience that people will have when they actually start working there? Because, it's quite damaging if you attract those people from different minoritized groups into your organization, and then they either have to adapt themselves or their identities to fit in, which happens quite a lot. So, like, they may have to kind of code switch, if they've got a sexual orientation, which is, same-sex attraction. If that's not the norm and that's not acceptable within the culture in those teams, then they'll have to disguise a bit of themselves to kind of get by, perhaps. So they do what we call kind of code switching to kind of lessen. Somebody put it on a documentary I saw the other day, but lessen their gayness, to actually be accepted in the wider group. So a great visceral example of this is when I was working at Lotterland, I got approached by a developer who had created a great overlay, virtual overlay that you could put on your recruitment site so that everything would be easily readable to anybody who was kind of dyslexic, yeah, or had some kind of neurodivergent condition similar to dyslexia.
Yeah.
So loads of kind of changing colour, font size, changing colour of background, being able to magnify in and out, kind of reorganise things. And I was like, absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I really like this. And I said, so how does it work? How will it work with our internal systems? Our kind of, we use Slack to communicate, email to communicate. We've got our kind of industry specific information systems that we all have to kind of interact with on a daily basis. And the guy was like, oh, no, this is just for your recruitment site. And I was like, well, so I'm going to attract all these people with dyslexia with a great experience, and then they can co-work for us. And I know that we don't have anything in place to support them, and that we don't have the resources to support them.
There is a lot of window dressing, isn't there?
Yeah.
There's a lot of, just, we are great, come and work for us. But then behind the scenes, it doesn't follow through.
Yeah. But if you focus internally, if you focus on getting your culture right, then, diversity will happen. People will come because your reputation will grow. That's the theory anyway.
Do you think many companies are getting it right, Sophie?
No, I don't. I think one of the things that I've noticed, particularly, it's a great example, the online gaming industry where I've been working, because it's a very new industry. So it only kind of took off, in the first decade of the new millennium. So you suddenly had the advent of the internet enabling all this traditional retail kind of, gambling product provision to be lifted online.
Yeah.
So you literally had an explosion, a tech explosion, and areas like Gibraltar, the Isle of Man, Malta, kind of sprung up as hubs for these online gaming companies, usually for, tax purposes.
Yeah.
And so these organisations have grown really, really quickly. If you look at a company like Entain, when Entain was GVC, I think they had 3,000 people working for them. That was, rewind, it's going to be around 2019 or 2018, something like that. Fuzzy on dates. But now they're Entain, global company, about, last count about 25, so it's circa 25,000 people working for them. Just shows you how quickly this is kind of, and it's become truly global in terms of provision as well. Different markets opening up around the world. And it's been a great microcosm to see how companies which are completely focused on commercial gain, so it's all about the P&L, it's about Q1 results compared to Q2, and it's kind of really up tempo. You've got some really talented, high paid, clever people kind of churning out product, which is bringing in, dollars, euros, and pounds and pence. And then these companies are growing, and all of a sudden they learn that they've got to be socially responsible, and they've got to give consideration to, the ESG, the kind of governance model, the environmental side of things and the social side of things, and they've got to be sustainable. So these companies recognise they need to be better employees, better employers, to actually kind of make sure that their companies are sticking around. People still want to work for them. And what they did, and this is true with most of the companies I work for in Gibraltar, and those that I haven't, is they will employ a diversity inclusion manager or head of, because they know they've got to do diversity inclusion to be a better company. They don't know what success looks like.
Right.
They don't know how to measure it. They don't know how to measure the outcomes of what success looks like. They just know they've got to have diversity inclusion, and then they can talk about it and say, yeah, we're diverse, we're a diverse organisation, we're very inclusive. But because the majority of C-suite level people don't fully understand diversity inclusion at all, they use it as a kind of talking point. They kind of have a light touch relationship with it internally in the business. People can go for years as diversity inclusion roles, and they could be doing the worst job ever, but nobody would really know because they don't know what good looks like. They don't know what bad looks like. They just know they're doing it, and that's okay.
So they know they need it. They may not really
Yeah.
understand why they need it. They may just intellectually think, yeah, this is something we should have. But beyond that,
Yeah. So that's why I kind of describe it almost like painting by numbers. This kind of corporate DE&I culture that's kind of grown up, and it's a very cynical view. I understand that, and it's not true of every company. If you look at some of the big successful companies who truly do have sustainable, successful strategies, the Apples of this world, huge kind of consulting companies like Accenture, they actually really get what diversity inclusion is. Google's the same, and so they treat that as a work stream and give it equal importance to all their other kind of technical outputs, and they actually invest not just money into those work streams, but they also invest their curiosity and their work time, and they get involved, at a senior level in a meaningful way, not in a tokenistic way.
the investment of time shows real intent, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's easy to sign the check, authorize the spend of money, but the investment of time shows real intent. When you talk about inclusion, in a previous conversation, you shared an example of inclusion of a high percentage of people in a company not feeling included. Can you retell that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So in my last company I worked for, Lotterland, they're based in Gibraltar. Probably about 500 staff at any one time. Main office in Gibraltar, small office in Malaga, in Spain, and loads of little offices, satellite offices around the globe, which are just like outposts with 2 or 3 people in them. So I was brought in to kind of bring diversity inclusion into Lotterland. So again, they recognised, we need to do something around this because we're not doing anything at the moment. So it was a great opportunity for me, rather than doing that painting by numbers approach, using a traditional kind of diversity inclusion calendar to frame all of our activities. I actually spent time with managers in the organisation, particularly the head of product, to actually design some questions, meaningful questions, which would enable Lotterlanders to tell me what they wanted from diversity inclusion and what it meant to them. And so we released this survey, people responded, and we got some really surprising results. And the results were that by far the biggest disenfranchised group that considered themselves excluded when they were at work were people who didn't come from a British culture and who spoke English as a second language. Because we later found out that we had, I think it was 37 different nationalities working for the company. So you would have things happen like award ceremonies or even kind of senior level meetings where senior staff would get people's names wrong on a regular basis. And names are important to people.
Yeah, it's the most important word,
aren't they? So we captured all of that information. We followed it up with listening groups to make sure we weren't making assumptions. And the first quick win we decided to do was to get everybody to spell their name phonetically on their email signature, which then meant that everybody in the company knew how to pronounce everybody else's name and didn't have an excuse for not doing it. And it didn't cost anything. It was low cost. It was low time intensity, and added an amazing output, in terms of results.
That's really nice. Do you know what I like about that is you haven't followed just a formulaic, well, let's celebrate this in some headline level. You've got some data there, and you found some fairly quick and easy wins. I mean, the phonetic spelling of a name on an email, that takes away all the awkwardness. It takes away all the mispronunciation if I might follow. That's nice, isn't it?
It is. Another things that we were able to do throughout the year, rather than celebrating these kind of big diversity inclusion months, we made our own celebration calendar up. I actually set up a team of Lotterland ambassadors from all different areas of the company, and we met monthly to decide what we wanted to kind of support or celebrate, as companies. So everybody kind of fed their views in through their ambassador. We created like Festival of Nations. We identified that because we were largely working remotely, very much hybrid organization, that we needed to create opportunities where we came together, but not so just socially, because there's a big drinking culture in the online gambling industry. So we created, I think we called it the Lotterland Olympics, a series of sporting events throughout the year where people could do anything from like paddle tennis to golf to football, five-a-side to running, or joining a virtual kind of walking race, throughout the year so people could get their steps in. But it just created loads of opportunities for people to connect at work, but not focused on, their kind of core work roles. But it just helped people to actually connect with each other, have different conversations with each other. And if you've made those human connections and you're in team A, and the other person that you need to do something for you is in team B, in a different location. If you've already got a really great relationship because of your shared interest in paddle tennis, and you know each other really well, then those barriers have gone for that communication, and you increase efficiency tangibly within the company.
I think what I'm taking away from our conversation, Sophie, is just as leaders, we need to enable people to make connections.
Absolutely. And I suppose that if I was kind of try and summarize, is the answers that we're all seeking are really obvious. They're very simple. They've always been in front of us. And just by helping people to deal with each other well with good intent, to create human connections both within teams and outside of teams, then you can achieve the results that people are trying to achieve with these kind of huge corporate diversity inclusion schemes. Now, it's not just diversity inclusion schemes, but it's like we have a tendency to overcomplicate things. Okay. Now, I've worked in many different roles in my life. I've worked in financial services. I've worked in residential care. I've worked in teaching. I've worked in policing. And the one kind of human trait that I've always noticed is how people try and create an aura of mystery and intrigue around what they do. And they make it sound quite opaque, so that when they're talking about it, they use their own language, their own jargon that they created. And it holds people at an arm's length from really kind of knowing what they're all about. Quite often, they're just doing really simple tasks. They create their own kind of mystique and jargon around individual roles, whichever industry you work in. And diversity inclusion is no different. So you get all of this creation of kind of language, terminology that generally people kind of feel, sometimes confused by, somebody just completely perplexed. And quite often the language of diversity is quite often the biggest barrier to people actually being included. Because again, if you create a specialized department or kind of industry around a certain function, it's human nature. You make it special. so that you can kind of, define your worth and, increase the amount that you'll get rewarded for that, that particular role. Whereas you just kind of look behind the curtain, whether it's somebody working in kind of the finance team, in the product team, or the diversity inclusion team. When you pull the curtain, it's like, oh, so you actually just do that, and then you do that bit, and then they're like, yeah, it's that kind of level. So we'd create all of these complexities around what we do, and it's just not helpful. And so solutions are invariably right in front of us.
That's a really interesting point. Back in the 70s, not that I remember this, I hasten to add, the quality in manufacturing, quality used to happen at the end of the production process. So you'd have the quality department. But of course, huge amount of money has been spent making the product for it to be rejected at the end of the production line. So then they changed that and made it everyone's responsibility. And I think it's the same thing here with diversity and inclusion. It's everyone's responsibility. It's not just a department. The department, I guess, can lead on it, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's everyone's responsibility.
Everyone's responsibility. Everybody, has a leadership role. Leadership is a behaviour. It's not actually a role, in my opinion. But people kind of lead in teams, but we all lead each other individually as well.
Yeah.
So it's I kind of lose my train of thought here. There's something really.
Let me ask you about psychological safety, because that's a buzzword of the moment.
Okay.
What's your views on psychological safety? Personally, I like the idea of working in a space that's psychologically safe, but I think there's some miscommunication about it. What's your interpretation of the term psychological safety?
So psychological safety is quite simply create an environment within a team, department, or an organisation where people can turn up to work as their authentic identity, without any kind of fear of negative comments or attribution. They can feel completely comfortable, just like anybody else would. So you've got that equity of feeling at ease within the organisation. But also, psychologically safety is people being able to make mistakes and learn from mistakes without being punished. Psychological safety is people being able to say something in a meeting that may be ridiculous, that may be really, it's been considered 300 times before, but actually have their contribution valued, and treated with some decent feedback. So not kind of ridiculed or dismissed in any way. So all of those negative behaviours stop people kind of bringing their full self to the table, so to speak. So when people talk about psychological safety, it's creating that environment where people can just kind of contribute without fear or further, really.
What about accountability, Sophie? I mean, does it encourage accountability?
Absolutely. Yeah. So at the end of the day, if you've created a psychologically safe space by treating everybody as kind of just as the human beings that they are, and sometimes celebrating who they are, throughout the year in any kind of way that you want to. If you've created that psychologically safe space, then it doesn't dismiss accountability, because all that's left when everybody's feeling comfortable and accepted is actually behaviour and performance, and that's exactly what people should be judged on when they're in the workplace. It's like, so accountability is there 100%, because if you're just judging people on have they, met their outputs requirements, have they achieved their key performance indicators, then that they are doing a good job. And if they're not doing that, they're accountable for their performance.
It's more objective.
Absolutely. It's completely objective. Now, you can use your kind of great managerial insights and the connections that you've made with each other to understand why somebody may have not performed as well as perhaps you're expecting them to. But then you're actually getting straight into problem solving, what the problem is, and you're more likely to find a successful solution for a sustainable improvement.